A star in the NFL is born. I mean, as simple as that. This is a guy who continues what has been a trajectory unlike almost any player in my memory. A walk-on at 2 schools who at his second school, his second to last year, sets the all-time college football efficiency mark. The next year breaks his own mark en route to winning the Heisman. Goes #1 despite being maybe 6 feet tall. And in his first action for a team that hadn't won in a couple years, not only leads them to victory, but they were down 14-0 when he comes into that football game. All of a sudden, passes that were being missed were not only pinpoint accuracy, but high velocity. Canty, we were talking before the show, he's 17 of 23, but 3 of those were perfectly placed balls that were just flatly dropped by the New York Jets. Aside from one pass that he got away with in the back of the end zone, I don't think he missed a throw the entire game. This is a Browns team that in the last decade was 1-39 when trailing by double digits at the half.
Wow. And
they won last night. This is a Browns team who I believe their season was on the brink. And you might say, wait, they hadn't won they went 0-16 last year. They already had a tie this year. Why would their season be on the brink? Because they could have won week 1. They could have won week 2. You could argue they should have won both of those games. And if you finally are a favorite for the first time since before you got your last win, and you lose to a Jets team that is not very good, and your quarterback situation is unsettled, it's very easy for even a team with a bunch of new guys to feel like, same old Browns. Here we go again. He infused this team with swagger, and most importantly, he infused this team with skill. And I watched Baker Mayfield, and I said, this is why this guy has exceeded all expectations at every level. He was great last night.
No, Baker Mayfield was outstanding, and there's no doubt that he gave this team a spark when they needed it. Being able to come in and work that 2-minute drill the way that he did, marching down the field for 5 plays, 39 yards, and then ultimately culminating in that field goal to get some points on the board for the first half. But when you looked at that Browns offense, before the last possession that Tyrod was the quarterback, they had a grand total of 2 first downs. So, I mean, they weren't moving the ball in the first half. They weren't consistent. But when Baker got in the game, he was outstanding, especially on third down passing. He was 5 for 7 for 55 yards, and he had 4 conversions. So, I mean, it was impressive to see his understanding of the concepts that Hugh Jackson was asking him to execute. He identified the coverages, seeing that the Jets were in single high and being able to attack the seams. That ball that he threw to Jarvis Landry when he just dunked on Middleton, the safety for the Jets, that was an outstanding placement of the football. You can't throw it any better than that. It was a great catch by
the Jarvis right by the goal line. I think we're showing it right now, there. It seemed like it was an impossible catch, but also an impossible
That looks like
throw.
an NBA poster. Exactly. Jarvis Landry makes a great play, but, I mean, he put that ball only where his guy could get it. And that's the impressive thing about Baker Mayfield. And he had a perfectly placed fade route to Antonio Callaway. Callaway just dropped it. But, Nick, you mentioned it. You saw the velocity in his passes. It was a different ball that receivers had to catch versus what Tyrod had been doing for this team. So you can see why John Dorsey made the decision to draft Baker Mayfield. The physical talent is there, but now we're starting to see the actual production now that he's in the game.
You also can't ignore the fact that as soon as he came into that game, there was a shift in energy. You heard it from the crowd. You almost saw it from the other players. They were a little more focused. They were catching balls that were dropped earlier in the first half. You saw it in the results. Obviously, he was putting points on the board. But then you wonder, is that, how much of that was just momentum? You have your new guy in, your heralded chief, and how much of that is like, this is something that's sustainable.
No,
this is something that can last.
It was that he's better.
Yes,
listen, he's flatly a better football player. Tyrod got a raw deal last year, and the people in Buffalo still seem to want to recreate the history of what happened last year. But Tyrod this year has been bad. He was awful in week 1. Week 2, he was better, but threw a brutal interception, and he got a little shine because of that big 4th and 5 touchdown that they thought was going to be the game winner. And yesterday was the worst he had played. They could not move the football. Baker is a better football player than Tyrod Taylor. And the experience of, if we remember to the preseason, Tyrod in the game that I thought he broke his wrist, where it looked like he had suffered a bad injury. Baker came in and didn't play very well in the moments he had, and then Tyrod came back. Baker said after the game, I wasn't ready to go in. It was coming in off the bench is a new experience for me in that regard. That experience did him well, I feel like, in this game, because they might have made a change at halftime either way, but he was ready to go on a moment's notice once Tyrod went in concussion protocol. And you mentioned it, those 3 points before the half were huge. And to your point, Jenna, about the crowd, the beginning of this game, those Browns fans, it sounded like a playoff game. Those fans were as hyped for a Week 3 Thursday night game as I've ever heard.
But that quickly dropped off.
It went away, and then he reinvigorated them.
No, he did reinvigorate them. They scored on four of his first 5 possessions as the starting quarterback. But when I looked at last night's game, that was 2 teams that were trying to prove to themselves that they were who they thought they were coming into this season. What Todd Bowles has been saying to his team, what Hugh Jackson had been saying to his team, both franchises are trying to turn the page on losing seasons. And so I think when you looked at that game last night, it almost presented the perfect opportunity for Baker Mayfield to step in, because now you have a chance, if you're Hugh Jackson, to solidify him as your starting quarterback moving forward, because you have a long weekend. It's almost like a mini bye week, so you can take advantage of that time. And then you've got the Oakland Raiders, who, oh, by the way, struggle to get to the quarterback, and it's a team that's still trying to find their way. So if you were going to pick a spot in your schedule where you would make Baker Mayfield the starting quarterback, this would be the time. I know John Dorsey and Hugh Jackson didn't want to play Bake the entire year, but you can't deny the talent that this guy has, and you saw how the team responded.
And a lot of Browns fans are probably asking, why not just start Baker from the start? If it was so clear that he was the better quarterback coming in, why wouldn't that have been the choice?
I don't know that he was the better quarterback for Week 1. I don't right now it looks like that. I don't know how much he benefited from not having the expectations of being the Week 1 starter. I don't know how much he benefited from watching NFL football on the sidelines for the first couple weeks. And we did not expect Tyrod Taylor, who, as far as taking care of the football, is one of the 3 best in NFL history. It's the one thing he does at an elite level, take care of the football. We didn't expect that he would have brutal turnovers in weeks 1 and 2, but Baker will be the starting quarterback moving forward. After the game, it seemed like the entire internet, Chris, was criticizing Hugh Jackson for not saying, yes, Baker's our starter. Even if he knows it, which he does, you can't do that to Tyrod. You can't, while a guy
Not in that moment.
No, you can't have him find out while he's concussed via the media. Like, you just flatly can't. There's nothing to be gained by announcing it right there. The players know that when they play the Raiders, Baker's going to be the starter. Tyrod probably knows, but Hugh Jackson would have, I think, you tell me as a player, I think he would have been doing a disservice to Tyrod Taylor, who's handled everything like a professional, to announce it at the podium moments after the game.
Well, that's what it comes down to. There's a respect factor between Hugh Jackson and Tyrod Taylor. He's a veteran player, and so you have to offer the opportunity to at least have a sit down and explain the situation and tell him at this point, with the franchise, it's best for the team if they go in the direction of the young quarterback, because Baker Mayfield just showed it on the field, and that's undeniable. The other 51 guys in the locker room, they know who the best quarterback on this roster is. They know who the guy that gives them the best chance to win is. It's Baker Mayfield. And so eventually this was going to be his team, but because of the injury, Tyrod getting banged up last night, it's sooner than everybody expected.
And the other thing those guys know quickly here, that defense is very good.
Oh, yeah.
That defense is ready to win right now. And so if you get an infusion at the quarterback position, this Browns team, I know that most people were like, hey, they could win 4 or 5 games. I was out on a limb saying I think they can go 9-7. Well, they have a tie now, so that's messed up. But this is a Browns team that can compete with a good portion of the league, because that defense is ball hawking, and all of a sudden they might have a plus player at quarterback.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.